I'm Miyah Sundermeyer, and I would like to welcome you to the latest episode of my blog series. So far, I have been able to share my own experiences on what it's like for me to live with Asperger syndrome. A second thing that I will do is give my 2 cents on what's going on with autism in the media. A third area entails providing tips and advice for those of you that have Asperger syndrome or an autism spectrum disorders. I also like to reach out to family members and educators and friends and peers and mentors, as well as advocates and anybody inside the community. And finally, I will cover topics on things that I'm passionate about. Now, before I dive into tonight's topic, I have 2 things to mention. Number 1, if you click up here in the upper right-hand corner, this is a really cool TED Talk by a musician named Jonathan Chase. Now, Jonathan is an individual on the autism spectrum like myself, and he is somebody that sees music notes in the forms of colors and shapes, and he also sees chords on his guitar in his own mind. So please be sure to check it out because, again, I think it's really cool. And a second thing I would like you guys to do is check out my written blogs on WordPress.com because they are scholarly and also practical application. And you can check those out under helloworld240.wordpress.com. That's helloworld240.wordpress.com. And what I would like to do now is give my tips and advice for those of you that are family members of an individual of an autism spectrum disorder, or rather, as I like to say, Asperger syndrome, because I think it's really critical. So yesterday afternoon, I was looking at a forum for people with Asperger syndrome, and I was looking on a message board for people who are sad about certain things. And they can go on there and pour their little hearts out about what's bothering them. So one of them was talking about how their family likes to argue about them. So I opened up the thread, and they were talking about how their family members were complaining about them because they had limited interest, because they had poor social skills and made inappropriate comments, because they couldn't read social cues or facial expressions, and because they think that they're using excuses to get away with things. And what I wanted to do was talk to those of you who are family members because I think it's really important. So, first and foremost, congratulations. You have an amazing child. It doesn't mean that they're lesser of a person. It just means that they have a unique way of seeing the world. Yes, they have their disabilities, such as reading certain cues. They may not be able to tolerate certain clothes or certain environments without special equipment. But that doesn't mean they're a half or a lesser of a person. And it also means that it does not give you an excuse to complain about them and argue and make fun of them just because you're frustrated. That's not acceptable. There are other things that you can do as a family member that I think you could master doing. And what I wanted to do was provide some steps. So, number 1, I would first of all recommend that you go and learn everything that you can about autism and Asperger syndrome because the internet is wide and available. If you don't have internet at your house, I would recommend going to a library and perhaps taking your laptop along or going and checking out some books about autism and Asperger syndrome. I also would recommend listening to some TED Talks. And perhaps one of the people you could listen to is Dr. Temple Grandin, or you could also listen to a neat lady named Jennifer O'Toole because they have experiences of living with autism and Asperger syndrome. Second thing you guys might do is check out a support group for families and parents and grandparents because you're going to find all kinds of people that you can relate to because, again, you never know who you're going to meet, and these might be people who are positive. Another thing that you could do is perhaps find a mentor or become a mentor for your child. Now, your mentor could be somebody at your place of worship. They could be a neighbor that gets along with your family member. And they could also be somebody who the child works with if they're old enough. But whatever you do, never shout at your child. Never make them feel bad about themselves or feel like they're a bad person because they do things differently than your other kids or than the others in your family, because that's just cruel. And I would also recommend that perhaps you should read the book Different But Not Less, or not Different But Not Less, but you could read the book The Way I See It, which is what I'm reading right now. But Different But Not Less is one of the books by my hero, Dr. Temple Grandin. I also would like to recommend that as family members, what you need to do to work on this limited interest is, number one, if they don't like math or if they have certain things that they hate, you need to take those limited interests and find things related to those topics that they're not really crazy about, because that could expand into something else and that could turn into a career. So let's say that your child likes Lord of the Rings, but they hate mathematics. So what you need to do is perhaps buy a bunch of cheap rings somewhere, and you could use those rings to talk about, I don't know, how many rings are there in a row, and just do the math of them on a visual scale. You could also teach them to go hiking or go camping on a trek, just like they do in Lord of the Rings. If you have a child that likes space movies like Star Trek and Spaceballs and Star Wars, you could get them into astronomy. And for those of you that are frustrated, other things you should do is perhaps go and talk to a professional. And maybe you could go and get some guided meditation and talk to other people. But anyway, I'm out of time for tonight. If you like what you saw, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also be sure to share this with your support groups and with any parent or any family member out there. And be sure to share this on social media. Until next time, I'm Miyah Sundermeyer. And before I leave, please do not forget to comment below. I'm Miyah Sundermeyer. Bye.